This confirms it, as a new report from an insider has revealed some insight into Peter Laviolette's future with the New York Rangers and what management and ownership is planning to do with Chris Drury and the direction of this team. We're going to break it all down in this episode of Rangers Digest, but before we do that, a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. About 68% of you who watch these videos are not actually subscribed to the channel, so if you want to stay up to date with everything that's happening with your New York Rangers, it's free. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. Now, coming off one of the craziest games of the year, and you have to wonder why they waited until they were basically eliminated from the playoffs to have that performance. We got a bombshell of a report from Pierre LeBrun, and I want to touch on the game as well, but we will in a little bit. Let's get into the report right away, and it's very interesting from Pierre LeBrun. He says that teams around the league believe that the New York Rangers will fire head coach Peter Laviolette after the season ends. So we knew, and I was saying this all season, that there was no way this coach was getting fired while the season was on. Like, while the season was happening, there's no way he was getting fired. But by all accounts from around the league and what Pierre LeBrun has heard, Peter Laviolette is getting fired next week. He's done as soon as the season is done. And I have to say, I think fans were expecting this. I think fans at this point were hoping for this. I think players on the team were hoping for this. We'll get to that in a second and why maybe that wasn't so deserving, but we'll get to it. And the other tidbit that he dropped, I say tidbit, but this is also a huge report. Chris Drury is also expected to be quote unquote okay with ownership holding trust in the GM and president. So what we know from this report is Peter Laviolette is getting fired next week, so we can expect that. And Chris Drury is not going anywhere. So first of all, let me know in the comments below, air your frustrations with Peter Laviolette. It looks like he's going to be gone. Who would you want to replace him? We'll get to some replacements later in the video. But the other thing from this report, Chris Drury is going to remain the GM and president of the New York Rangers. Let me know how you feel about that, and I'll give my thoughts in just a second. But again, from Pierre LeBrun on insider trading and talking to others around the league, the low-hanging fruit, the expectation from a lot of people that I have talked to is that Peter Laviolette could get fired. So the expectation at this point seems like Peter Laviolette will be fired next week when the season wraps up, because the Rangers, again, at this point, they have to win out the rest of the season and the Montreal Canadiens have to lose out. I don't see either of those things happening. So I think the Rangers at this point are missing the playoffs after one of the craziest games of the year. I mean, this is one of the most insane impact score charts I've seen all season. Almost nobody in the negative impact, and I've never seen it like this for any team all season. And it makes you wonder, again, why they waited till they were almost eliminated to do this. And I know the Islanders' backup goalie is not good, but really 9-2, like, you put in that performance now on the second half of a back-to-back, are we so serious with this team? And I have to think that a performance like this tells me that they've been playing awful. Now they're basically eliminated. So now they play. It almost tells me that they're playing to get the coach fired. They were like, we need this guy. A lot of us are returning next year. We need this guy gone. He's not going to lead the group. And we've been talking about a lot of the quotes from Peter Laviolette recently. Here's another one, right? And I want to get into some quotes from, the last few days as well. And he said, it's been there. The frustration, the disappointment level has been there. So we're still there in regards to, obviously, what's happening recently. And he had a quote the other day that said, we covered in a video yesterday that, there's no problem with their defensive structure. There's no problem with their team structure. Although players are saying now that they're very confused by the structure and they don't know what's going on the ice. So clearly there's a disconnect between the players and the coach. I don't think the players like this coach. I don't think this coach can work with young players. Last night, as I'm showing the impact score chart, who are a couple names that are missing here? Gabe Perreault was scratched again. And not only him, Brennan Othman. What are we doing? The top guys on this team, they've shown all year, they're not going to win you games. So why are you playing them over the young guys? They're not going to win you the game, even if you want to win the game to try and make the playoffs, which won't happen. It makes no sense. And I know a lot of people were saying, why would you even play a rookie? It doesn't make sense anyway. What's he going to do to help the team? It doesn't matter. It's the principle of where this team is at. You should be playing a rookie right now because the games don't matter. You should be getting this guy some experience. You burned a year of his ELC to have him in the press box eating popcorn and watching NHL games, which he's done his entire life. That was another quote from this coach, Peter Laviolette, that said, you want him to watch games. Sometimes that's good for experience. His dad played in the NHL. Gabe Perreault has been watching NHL games his entire life. Makes no sense to me. Peter Laviolette is probably gone at the end of next week. And now, This is continued from the Pierre LeBrun quote that he said, there are other issues in New York. Now, I go back to the way Barclay Goodrow was waived and his exit from New York last summer, and I know that didn't sit well with some Rangers players, then how Jacob Trouba, the captain, got dealt. Now, this has kind of gotten debunked a bit. I know the team and the players on the team were upset with how both Goodrow and Trouba were treated, but in a player survey that happened a couple weeks ago, or maybe a couple months ago at this point, the New York Rangers were still the hottest destination. Players still said that they wanted to go to New York in a player survey, right? So obviously they're not in that room, some of them that are taking this survey, and they wouldn't know what's going on, right? But you can see it from the outside looking in. We can all see how these guys were treated, and most players still would want to play in New York. So it's been debunked a little bit in terms of that whole narrative that players will want to stop coming to New York. I don't think that's the case. And I think that, Chris Drury unfortunately did what he had to do to try and make the team better and free up salary cap space so he can go in this summer and make some decisions, honestly, and try and make the team better. So I still have a little bit of hope in Chris Drury, I have to say, because I think some of the moves that he made were actually good, depending, where the team is at, right? He's made some bad moves. Of course, every GM does, and we've highlighted those on the channel. But I think he's made some good moves, and Peter Laviolette has essentially sabotaged him by not using those pieces correctly. So this is where we're at with the team, and this is all it is. And, Vince Mercogliano makes a good point here. While I don't think a couple scratches will ruin any of the prospects and their development, I don't think so either. I also totally don't get why the Rangers are doing it. It makes there is less than a 0%, possible positive ranking for this to happen. This makes no sense. There is no possible reason for this to be happening, right? Like, I don't even have the words to describe it. It's awful. I mean, just a mind-boggling decision from Peter Laviolette. And, this is the other thing that Laviolette, did scratch Perreault and Othman last night. And, if only Perreault was older and made a ton of mistakes, he'd see the ice every game. Because a bunch of these, Zibanejad seeing the ice. Chris Kreider hasn't been good this year. We're going to have another video on Chris Kreider. He could be leaving New York as well. He hasn't had a good season, or any of these guys, for the most part, have had bad seasons, and yet the young guys are paying the price for it. It makes absolutely no sense to me. So if you expect Laviolette, a man who knows he's looking for a job this summer because he's gone, he's fired, to give a bleep about developing a kid who will 100% be here next year, I don't know what to tell you. Perreault is not his problem, but he is Drury's problem, and Drury allowing this is a problem. Now, I don't think Drury's allowing that. Like, he can't fire Laviolette right now. There's like 3 games left in the season, right? It's not going to happen. It's going to happen at the end of the season. It's done after the season ends. But it is, Drury's problem that, he hired this coach. We know that this coach can't work with young players. We know that Chris Drury made a decision earlier this season to go younger and kept this coach around. That can be true, but he has to hire a new coach now. And now a lot of people are wondering who that new coach is, and a lot of people have been asking me. I thought this tweet from Phil Kosher was actually very interesting. Now, if Peter Laviolette is in fact relieved of his duties at the end of the season, who would you want to see him replaced by? Now, my answer 3 years ago would have been Chris Knobloch, but we know that that's not an option right now. He might take the Oilers to the Stanley Cup final again, but that's all good and done. That's done. It's in the past, right? But Phil Kosher here says David Carl. And now you must be wondering, who is David Carl? Well, he is the coach for the University of Denver, a very good development program. He's a coach that knows how to work with young players. And I think that the Rangers now, where what they are, we have to talk about Laviolette being fired and what's next. This is what's happening, right? By all accounts, this is what's happening. We need a coach in here in New York to coach the Rangers that's good with young players and developing players. Or it's not even his job to develop players. They need a better development staff as well, but a guy who can come in and work with younger players. And then if you want to go for a Stanley Cup again, you hire another coach somewhere down the line. But you need a guy who's going to come in and kind of work with the young players, because this is a young team now, right? And we know that some of the guys like Zibanejad are not going to stick around. And they went out and got JT Miller so he can be a leader on this team with Vincent Trocheck, a couple guys who actually do look like they care, right? So maybe that's the answer. Maybe it's another guy who's recycled in the NHL. We will see exactly what happens. But again, Chris Kreider has not had a good season, but we'll wrap it up there. I'm going to tease this. We are going to have another video on Chris Kreider, and there's been some interesting news about Chris Kreider, so we'll touch on that as well. But the season is nearing an end, and by all accounts, looks like Peter Laviolette and his time with the New York Rangers is also coming to an end. So let me know in the comments what you think about Chris Drury and Peter Laviolette and the possibility of Peter Laviolette getting fired? And who would you hire as head coach of the New York Rangers? I want to hear your suggestions. I think David Carl is a good one. You can work with younger players, but there might be some other options there that maybe I'm missing. So let me know in the comments what you think. And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button so you get to stay up to date with everything New York Rangers.